Welcome to the deep dive. Ever get that feeling that society's kind of shaping you, or that there are these powerful forces you can't quite name?
Yeah, forces that are just sort of there under the surface.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving into a really big intellectual clash that gets right to the heart of those questions. Jürgen Habermas versus Michel Foucault.
A classic debate, really.
It is. You've given us the sources, and our mission here is to unpack three core critiques Habermas had of Foucault's ideas, hopefully giving you some insights that, stick with you.
And what's so interesting is how these arguments really challenge basic assumptions. Assumptions about power, knowledge, even our own ability to act.
So true.
We'll try to distill the key points, which are still super relevant in critical theory today, and help you connect them to, well, how you understand the world.
Okay, let's jump in. Habermas's first big point. Foucault's critique, it kind of lacks a normative foundation.
Right. What does he mean by normative foundation?
Well, Foucault has this powerful method, genealogy, right? Tracing where ideas in institutions like prisons or medicine actually came from.
Showing the power relations baked into them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He suggests progress is often just, control in disguise. But Habermas immediately asks, well, where's Foucault standing when he makes that critique?
Yeah, if all knowledge is tangled up with power, isn't Foucault's own theory just another power play? That's the crux of it.
The performative contradiction, as Habermas calls it.
Exactly. Foucault pulls the rug out from under objective value judgments, saying it's all power knowledge. But then he clearly does value some things over others. He sympathizes with the marginalized. Right?
He does. He critiques power.
But from what standard? Habermas says you need a standard outside of power to critique it effectively. His answer is communicative rationality.
That idea of reaching understanding through open, reasoned discussion, free from force.
Right. Whereas Foucault's work seems to suggest such a universal rational standard isn't really possible. It's always situated, always power-laden.
Okay, so if Foucault says power is that pervasive, Habermas then questions how useful that concept actually is. That's critique number 2. The vagueness of power.
Yeah, Foucault's famous idea isn't power like a king holding a scepter, top down.
No, it's more like capillaries spread throughout society. A web.
Diffused, inescapable. It's a radical idea. But Habermas pushes back, saying, well, if power is everywhere and in everything, does the word even mean anything useful for analysis?
Does it lose its punch?
Kind of. Habermas insists we need to distinguish between different types of power. Think about it. A dictator throwing someone in jail, that's raw coercive violence.
Totally different from, say, a democratically elected government passing a law. That's legitimate authority, ideally.
Or just arguing a point in a debate that's the force of the better argument, hopefully not coercion. And then there's systemic power, like how the market works through money. These feel really different.
But Foucault sometimes seems to flatten them all out.
Habermas argues he does, yeah. Into this one big field of domination. And if you do that, Habermas says, how can you even think about positive political change, like turning coercive power into legitimate democratic power, if it's all just domination in different clothes?
Then meaningful transformation seems impossible. You're just swapping one form of power for another.
That's the concern, which leads nicely into the third point.
Right, the third critique. Foucault's dissolution of the subject. The idea that we are actually products of power.
Foucault argues modern power techniques don't just repress us, they actively produce us as individuals, shaping us into people who discipline ourselves.
He even famously said man is dead, meaning the idea of a stable, independent human subject isn't the foundation, but rather an effect of these power structures.
Which for Habermas raises a huge red flag. If the subject is just constructed by power, then who resists?
Where does resistance even come from? What's its goal?
Foucault talks about localized resistance, scattered acts of defiance, which is important, but Habermas feels it leaves no room for these acts to sort of join up, to build something constructive, a more just society.
And we're back to that first problem again, aren't we?
Exactly, the missing standard. If the subject is just a power effect, what basis do they have for even wanting a more just world, let alone agreeing on what that looks like?
So wrapping this up for you, what does it all boil down to? Habermas is really challenging Foucault on 3 fronts. Do you have grounds to critique if everything's power? Is your concept of power too broad to be useful? And if power creates the subject, who's left to fight back?
And these aren't just, dusty old academic arguments. They push you to think hard about how you figure out what's true or just, how you see your own ability to make a difference.
It makes you ask, when you feel something is wrong, what standard are you using? And who is the you that feels that way?
Yeah, it's fundamental stuff.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If knowledge and power really are as tangled together as these thinkers suggest, how do you, in your own life, decide what's truly just? And what is it that actually compels you to act on that conviction?